everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. This week, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to Kerry Sharpe, the Isle of Man's children's champion. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you very much.
That's great. I mean, it's so nice to have you on the podcast.
Thanks. I'm honoured to be here because I was looking at the list of guests that you've had recently, and some of them are really quite famous.
I know. I was very starstruck interviewing a few of them. So, how's your day going so far?
Well, it's started well. It's going well at the moment. You can never tell in the world of politics because anything could happen before lunch. But I've been out for my run this morning on the beach and watched the sun come up and done a bit of my Pilates stretching. So yeah, I'm feeling good.
That's nice. Is running something you do quite often?
Well, yeah, I do try to get out every morning for sort of my mental and physical health. I could definitely tell the difference when I don't get out.
Do you find it clears your head?
Yeah, I find that otherwise, as I'm waking up in the morning, thoughts start going through my head, usually about work, and I start thinking, oh, I need to be writing this, or I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. And actually, if I just can get up and get out and go for a run, then my mind is clear then for the start of the day. Yeah.
Do you listen to something while you're running, like music or audiobooks?
No, I don't actually. Same if I go walking, because I really like walking, but I just like to sort of hear the wind, you know, and the birds and the trees and stuff. But I know some people do prefer listening to music, and my husband, he listens to a lot of podcasts, and he can go out walking for hours and he'll just listen to a podcast.
Yeah, I find if ever I go out like walking with my dog or whatever, I'll sometimes listen to music, or we've got an exercise bike at home, so when I do that I listen to music because I'm not focusing on actually how much my legs are hurting. I'm focusing on whatever song I'm listening to.
Do you push yourself so that you actually feel the burn?
Yeah, usually I do. Like if I'm walking, I've got my mum with me, so I talk to her. But when I'm doing the bike, it's just me. We haven't the spare bedroom, so I always I try and push myself, but I need to listen to something, so I'm not sort of going, "Ow, this hurts. This really hurts, actually." So you are here today to tell us about the role of the Children's Champion and what you do. So to begin with, what is the role of the Children's Champion?
Well, it sort of falls into to two halves, really. The first half is making sure that children on the island know their rights, particularly the rights under the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. And the second part is to be a voice for children who are looked after. So that's any child who's in the care of the state. So that might be children who are fostered, who are in residential care, children with complex needs who, for whatever reason, also sort of come under children's services. And then I also include in that young care leavers, because even though in law we don't provide for children after they've left care after the age of 18, I think it's really important that we do still look after, in the sense that government is their corporate parent, and to me, government should look after their corporate children and give them support, no matter what age they are.
Yeah, definitely. And I can imagine that leaving care can be quite overwhelming. You don't really know what to do.
I think a lot of care leavers describe it as dropping off a cliff, like a cliff edge.
Yeah.
Even though there are services available and you do get assigned a leaving care social worker for a number of years, even so, I think that what we need to be doing is providing an awful lot more wraparound support for care leavers. So that's something that I'm really pressing for at the moment in Tynwald.
Right, okay. So, like you mentioned earlier, many of the human rights for a child are set out in a law called the United Nations Convention on the Human Rights of a Child. And I believe it's split into different articles. So, can you tell me what those articles cover?
Well, they cover all sorts of things. I mean, they range from things like as a child, you have a right to not go hungry and not go thirsty, and to have shelter. I mean, those are the ones that come very high up in the articles. It's split into different articles. But it also goes through to covering things like divorce of parents and the right of a child, where it's safe to do so, you know, to continue to see both parents. And that governments need to put in place different mechanisms to allow that to happen. One of my favourite ones actually is the right to play. You have a right to play as a child. And I think that's really important. And I mean, that in terms of the Isle of Man, for example, you know, that could mean, say you have a housing development. And what annoys me about housing developments is that they'll often put in a tiny little patch of bouncy concrete and, you know, a hobby horse on a spring and you know, a couple of swings, and that's it. And I wonder whether under that particular article we could actually start to insist that developers leave a lot more space so that children can play properly. That's something that I would like to see, you know, like... You think, well, gosh, then developers are making so much money out of selling, let's say, 20 houses or 30 houses. Then, you know, why shouldn't they leave half a field or a field just empty for children? So, yeah, I'm a big fan of that one.
Yeah, definitely. I think as a child, being able to play and be creative and sort of explore is really important, because as a child, playing is your escape, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's where you get to know what's really important to you in some ways, and I think it shapes the direction that you go in later in life. You know, when you're totally given the freedom to do whatever you want, and through your imagination, you know, I think that a lot of people end up kind of acting out things that they then later go on to do. I know at primary school, every break time, I used to make up stories, and then my friends would sort of say, you know, what are we going to act out today, you know, and I'd be like, oh, well, you're this person and you're that person, and I think that this is the story and whatever, and then we just go and act it out. And I think that kind of propelled me in that direction, really, in terms of work and stuff later on.
Yeah, definitely. I think using your imagination is a really important sort of quality to have, being able to be creative and, like you said, think of different stories. I do think it helps you later in life as well.
Totally. I mean, when you were, say, in primary school, what was your kind of favourite way of playing, would you say?
My favourite was always like imaginative play, because I could run around and I could play like tag and stuff, but it was trickier because obviously I couldn't see, and I would have to hold on to someone's arm, and not all the other kids really wanted me to play with them either. I was sometimes a little bit of an outcast because I was blind, and it was just that other kids didn't really know how to interact with me. So I would often just, if I wasn't playing with anyone, I would often just sit and sort of make up stuff in my head.
Yeah, I remember as a very young child, you know, looking forward to going to bed at night, because I could always look forward to having, you know, ages, you know, as long as I wanted, to sort of make up stories as well.
Yeah.
I just think it's so important. But that I mean, did it bother you that children didn't, for whatever reason, felt they didn't want to play with you at times?
Oh yeah, it hurt a lot. I was always very aware of it. I think from a very young age, I was aware that I was the blind girl. I was the blind girl. I was the outcast, and I wasn't conventionally normal. And I guess I did think, why? Why did I have to be the blind girl? And yeah, it did hurt that people didn't always want to play with me. But in some respects, I think it's made me stronger.
Yeah. I think I was saying earlier that my husband's blind, and he often sort of says that although obviously it brings difficulties, he feels that when he was younger, he got much more of a sense of who he was earlier on, and like sort of took a resilience out of that, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It does make you a lot more resilient.
I can sort of see parallels between what you're describing and what I've heard care workers describe with children that are in residential care at primary school level, and they were explaining to me that often they find that their child is the child at primary school who no one wants to play with, or very sadly when there'll be like a birthday, and at primary school often the whole
everyone
class
gets invited. Yeah.
Well, this care worker was telling me that in the case of this girl who she looked after, this girl was the only one who regularly wasn't invited to those parties, which I just find heartbreaking. But there's still so much of a stigma around children who are in residential care. Some teenagers were telling me recently, because they've just come out of care, that they felt that sometimes the parents of their friends were fine, but they felt that the parents of their friends didn't really want them to play with these kids. It was almost like they felt like the parents were sort of scared that something might rub off onto their own children.
Yeah, I mean, there is still quite a lot of stigma around, I think, and I think it'd be brilliant to try and reduce that stigma if possible.
Yeah, I think through social media I'm trying to work with we've got a group called Voices in Participation Council, which is made up of children who are in care and young care leavers, and I'm really keen to get them to start maybe making some podcasts or putting together some radio pieces, just so that they can get their voices out there.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good. So is the Isle of Man signed up to all of the articles on the Convention of the Rights of the Child?
What a good question. Because countries don't have to sign up to all of the articles. There were 2 articles which the Isle of Man was not signed up to, although they are now, because I remember picking it up when I wrote my first draft report earlier this year. One of the articles was to do with child slavery, and I'm trying to think what the other one was. Oh, it was to do with employment of young people. But actually, the Isle of Man has now signed up to those. So we are fully signed up to these articles.
Right, okay. So if a child was born with a disability or a sensory impairment, what would their human rights be?
I guess it would depend what country you were born in. Obviously, in Britain, Europe, there are equality acts, and also Britain, Europe, the States, many more countries are signed up to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, but some countries aren't. So in some countries, as a child with a disability, you wouldn't have any rights acknowledged whatsoever. I mean, we've had since 2017, I just sort of printed off a couple of pages here from the Equality Act in the Isle of Man. We've had the Equality Act. And there's a list of different characteristics which are protected under this act, which include disability, age, race, sex, sexual orientation, for example. And so, as a child, you're protected under that act in terms of any discrimination which might be made against you. There's also a United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and there's a subsection in that which appertains to children with disabilities as well. But in terms of the UNCRC, there's a specific article which talks about disabled children. It's very, very vague actually, but disabled children have the right to enjoy a full life with dignity and to participate as far as possible in their community. The government should support disabled children and their families. So it's very broad.
Yes, it is.
Very broad, because of course it covers economically developed countries and non-economically developed countries. So it's always going to mean a different thing, you know, wherever you're born.
I mean, I know from my perspective, as someone born with sight loss, I have the right to, I've been told I have the right to habilitation, which is A, being taught how to use my cane, and B, being taught things like independent living skills.
Okay.
So how to live independently. And I believe that there is something in the United Nations Convention that mentions habilitation that I don't know, or I don't think the Isle of Man are signed up to.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, in that case, you're going to have to tell me more about this, possibly after the podcast, because I wonder where that is. I wonder where that is, because I went through all the articles to see whether we were signed up. So I wonder if that might be under the Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities.
Maybe. I will have a chat to you about that.
Yeah. We'll pick that up, Evie.
Yeah.
We'll pick that up.
Okay. So how do you undertake your duties as children's champion and engage with children?
Well, in terms of engaging with children generally, you know, I would love to be able to spend longer on that part of the role, and in fact the role used to include all children, but now my main responsibilities are just for children who are looked after. But in terms of all children, I thought, well, how can I reach out to all children, you know, if I can't sort of get round, you know, all the schools and everything else. So I put together a video and a website for the Children's Champion. I'd like to have a standalone website, but there's no resources at the moment for that. So I've got a page on the government website, which of course no child is ever going to be browsing just for fun.
No.
But I've put on a video aimed at primary school children, explaining what the Children's Champion is all about and how Timbled works. And I've put up different educational materials that teachers can use as well. So I'm going to be working over the next year with teachers to promote, you know, those materials that are on there. And I am hoping to go into some schools where I'm invited, because I can't just sort of rock up at schools, and, you know, because I know teachers are busy, and from a political point of view, I don't want it to look like I'm trying to tell teachers what they should be teaching. But where I'm approached, I am, you know, more than happy to come in and talk to children. I chair a group called the Corporate Parenting Group, and that has different professionals from education and health and the constabulary and different places. And each time we meet, we have a representative from the Voices in Participation group that I mentioned. So we have a child who is in care, or a young care leaver, come and talk to us and tell us what the issues are. And that sort of forms a main part of what we do as a group, trying to address those problems.
Right, okay, that's really good that you have a child come in to talk to you guys, you know, because they are, I guess, they're the ones facing, you know, challenges, so...
Yeah, exactly, because, I mean, you can sort of, the higher up in government that people go, you know, you get presented with loads of data, but it's just, it doesn't really mean anything to me unless you actually meet the people that are at a grassroots level. You can't really know what it's like for a person, for anyone, you know, until you talk to them and listen to them.
Yeah, definitely. So what challenges do you face in your role?
Well, I think probably the main one is that, yes, I'm children's champion, and I'm really pleased to be children's champion. I wanted to be children's champion, but it's only part of my role as a Tynwald member. There's a lot of other responsibilities that I have as a member of Legislative Council and also of Tynwald. So I can't concentrate on this all the time. And I do think that we need someone, or maybe a government department, which actually brings together everything to do with children on the Isle of Man, because at the moment we don't have a department of children. You know, education's over here and health is over here, and you know, it needs to be brought together so that someone has responsibility for all of that. So that's a frustration, that's a challenge for me. What I did with my first report that I wrote this year, I tried to bring together in the appendix everything that I think needs fixing to do with children, and proposed solutions and asked departments when they were going to fix these things. So that's all there in my report. So I'm sort of trying to bring things together. Another challenge is that I don't have a budget to do anything with, so I need to kind of work creatively trying to get things done. And what other challenges? Well, I don't have any statutory powers. You see, if I was a children's commissioner, like they have in Scotland and England and Wales, I would actually have the law on my side. I would be able to compel departments to do certain things. Whereas no one on the island has got those statutory powers in terms of children. So it'll be interesting to see what this administration does. It has said that it will look at the concept of a children's commissioner, or it might look at how all departments can sort of bring consideration about children into their deliberations. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I think those are the main challenges, really.
Right, okay. So I believe that children in care leave at the age of 16, which seems quite young. Do you think this is an appropriate age, or would you like to see changes?
So you can leave at 16, you can leave care. Some children decide to stay on in education, so they don't leave care. They stay in care until they leave education. So you can't force anyone to stay in care after 16 if they don't want to. But if you're not in education, then you need to move on. And I think it's too young. I agree with you. I think it's far too young. And I think especially for people who've been in care, they've got so much going on. And if you think about it, even just being in care itself is a trauma. You know, You're not at home with your parents. I think that we should be looking at extending being in care up to 26. Mm-hmm. I don't think that that's too late, actually. And, you know, obviously, again, you couldn't force anyone to stay in care until 26, but I think that we should have that framework there for people so that they've got time to sort themselves out, maybe do their GCSEs later than 16. But, you know, we should be supporting them to do that, and supporting them into getting nice accommodation, because that's another thing that I'm really fighting for at the moment, is trying to get nice accommodation for people when they leave care, and also some accommodation for young people who would prefer to have a care worker, you know, living in that building just to give a bit of extra support. So, yeah, I've forgotten what the question was now. I've gone off on a tangent.
It's all right. We love tangents. It's fun. But yeah, I can imagine, even if you did choose to leave care, like when you finished education, you probably still have to start thinking about that, like around GCSE times, like 14, 15. And because you've got your GCSEs as well, it must be so much to have to take on and think about.
Oh, it's far too much. Because if you think about it, if you are to leave at 16, let's say you get to 16 and because also, I mean, the problem is that all of our children's homes are at maximum capacity. So new children are coming in all the time, which means that the older children need to move out. So you might move into semi-independent accommodation at 16. But I mean, then you have to sign on. You have to pay for all your own food and your clothes and your toiletries, and you have to manage your budgets. And to think that you might have to be doing that at the same time as doing your GCSEs, or if there's no room for you in semi-independent living, you might have to go and live in a bedsit on your own. And so if you're doing that at 16, which is far too young anyway, you're going to have someone talking to you when you're around about 14 saying, now next year, we are going to prepare you for moving on to semi-independent. So, you know, when I asked care leavers, when did you first start worrying about where you would be living when you sort of hit 16 or 18, they said, around about 12. And I just think that's so wrong.
Yeah, that's far too young. Like, that's pretty much when you start high school, and that's not what you should be worrying about when you start secondary school.
Totally.
So I know that your role covers children in various situations. Now, in order to be able to oversee that, you must require access to a great deal of data. Is this readily available to you?
I don't have access to personal data about our children, so that's only professionals working within children's services that can sort of access personal details about different situations. But on the corporate parenting group, we are sent information every 2 months, and this covers things like how many children do we have in care, at what ages are they, how many have personal education plans, how many are in danger of exploitation, which is a new set of data we've just started getting. There's various bits of data, but it's not as comprehensive as I would like to see it at all. And I think one of the reasons behind that is that with the construction of Manx Care, they have got a massive piece of work on at the moment, trying to create officially robust data for everything within health and social care. And my frustration with that is that children's services often come nearer to the bottom of the list when an organisation as big as Manx Care is looking at the whole of health and social care. You know, they start with the hospital and work their way down, really. So there's various bits of data that I'm still wanting that I'm not getting. So yes, there's a lot more data that we could have, which would be useful, but we get what we can at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's good that you sort of get what you can, but hopefully you'll be able to access all the data you need in the future.
Yeah, I do hope so. I mean, it's even across the whole of government, there hasn't really been a history of gathering data, and it's something that the whole of government has to get a lot better at. The Scottish government are very good at collecting data, and they have the Scottish parliamentary data centre where you can go as a parliamentarian and just access data on everything. You know,
right.
they're obviously they're a young parliament, so they've they kind of worked all that out when they first started off. You know how they wanted to do things, but yeah, I think we should be aiming for something like that.
Yeah, definitely. So, what are your hopes and plans for your role in the future?
So. I'd like to do more engagement with children in general. As I said, going into schools would be a really good thing. I want to concentrate in my next report on children with complex needs and complex disabilities. And I would add into that children who are on the autistic spectrum, because I think especially as they get older and they move from children's services into adult services, there's a big gap there at the moment. So there's no real provision for young people who are on the autistic spectrum who don't have learning difficulties. They tend at the moment to be sitting in their bedrooms getting depressed, and that's really sad, considering that when they are in school, they've had a lot of support, and suddenly that just stops because they're an adult. That's something that I really want to look into. And next month, I'm going to bring my Children's Champion report to Tynwald, and that has recommendations in it which include things like I've said I think we should be extending the leaving care age to 26, and I'm going to be asking government to come up with a costed and dated plan for how it's going to sort out accommodation for care leavers and children in care, and there's a few other recommendations in there as well. So I'm going to be hoping that my Tynwald colleagues support me on those recommendations.
Yes, well, I really hope that all goes well for you. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been so lovely to meet you, and I really appreciate you coming to talk to me.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.
And thank you to my listeners for listening, and I will see you all next time.